Well, first of all, let's look at the premise of that question, and I find that a little bit faulty. Yes, we are well below most states in averaging of state funding for education. NEA, in its 2003 report of state rankings, pretty much indicated that we spend fifth in the nation in terms of education funding. The problem is pretty much basically that we rely on local property taxes for funding education as opposed to state funding. So while we're 48th in state funding, we are fifth in terms of what we actually pay for students. This means there's an over-reliance on the property tax system, and it's really the reason why I've proposed a statewide teacher contract, which would bring the funding of that under the state assembly's control, the state budget, and I would pay for it by income taxes. It would relieve local property taxes because property taxes amount to about 50% or more of most municipal budgets. And in that way, it would alleviate the harm that's being done to the poor and those on fixed income and the seniors. I think that it's far more wiser to move to a statewide funding formula using the income tax situation. And I think that within that, you can probably find some savings as well, not necessarily elimination of a lot of personnel. But I think what you'd be able to do is find savings by efficiencies, costs of combining things. I have a real problem with this whole idea of combining the boards because they were combined not necessarily for education or pedagogical concerns. They were combined because somebody had a political problem with the two boards and one board acting, in essence, to snub their nose at the legislature. Because it's political in nature and not necessarily in the best interests of education, I think that that in itself makes it not a people policy, but really more of a political payback or vengeance kind of policy. There are reasons for combining the two boards, and I think that some of them could be, if they were actually, stated, they probably would be the much better way to go in terms of combining the boards. Yes, you need a combined board that will look at policy so that we transition our children from from high school education into our higher education system. So the coordination does not bother me. There are reasons that that could function. And in fact, I believe in a system that would really look at those types of objectives. The way it was combined seems to reek of political insider gamesmanship, and I think that that is wrong. Well, I think that the issue is also a questionable one. The more I review the documents related to the pension cases, the more I'm concerned. I think that this is not done yet. I know everybody touts pension reform, and especially my opponent touts it as being a done deal, but the fact of the matter is it's still in the courts. And reviewing the lawsuit, I have to admit that I am very moved by the arguments that are being made by the pensioners who were affected by this. I think our state has guaranteed these people a right to rely on what they've promised them. And I think that we look at it and say, okay, we can find, $75 million, $100 million here or there. I mean, we pay back 38 studios. Wall Streeters, we pay back Wall Streeters because we have a moral obligation. And yet our pension people, the very own people who worked for the state, who live in our state, those are the people that we're saying that we have no moral obligation to. It's a ridiculous, hypocritical position for the state to be in. I think that the pensioners have some valid claims under Article 1, Section 12 of the Constitution. I think that the law was ex post facto, even though it may only apply to criminal matters. I think that would provide more than a moral obligation to pay these people. I think that they have to come to the table and talk so that the state will benefit. We all have to work together. We can't work in isolation and expect the state to be solvent. We have to all work together. They would have to come to the table. But I think that negotiation rather than litigation is certainly the way to go. Well, I think what we have to do is examine what we do as a government. We certainly spend a lot of money. We can find money for ridiculous projects. I mean, we can find money for 38 studios. We can find money for the International Institute. We can find money that we waste away at the Johnston landfill in those fiascos. Certainly, it's not an issue of finding money. It's how you spend money. I mean, I had a business partner who always told me, it's not what you earn, it's what you spend. And if we get down to those basics, we can certainly do that. You know, gaming revenue, in 1994, when I ran for governor, I pledged not to use that as part of the general revenue. I said that should be kept aside for a rainy day fund schools or fund libraries with that, you know, as they were needed. But to put it into your operating budget is certainly, what it was then and it is now, is certainly a misguided way of budgeting. You know, you say, how would you raise this additional money? I mean, there are simple ways. I mean, we tax demographically, the middle class and the poor are the people who smoke. We tax cigarettes at $3.50 a package from the state level, and we also put sales tax on that. Okay, an $8 package, roughly 50% goes into taxes. Now, think about it this way. Why not tax political contributions 50%? And that way, anybody, you know, we're taxing the rich, not necessarily taxing the poor, because poor people don't necessarily demonstrate a willingness to give away money to campaigns. So I think that if we have a fairer tax system, it would be much better. Well, I do believe in regionalization. I do believe in consolidation of services. Everyone thinks that it's going to be this great panacea where we combine everything and we're going to make all these great savings. No, you're still going to need bodies to operate, and labor is probably the most expensive part of any budget, and especially in operation of government. My proposals would be to consolidate. I mean, I think we're ripe with such a small state. We're ripe to have a county-wide government. Maybe considering Providence as Providence Metro and Providence Rural or something along those lines. So instead of a 5 system, we would have 6. But in those, you could combine different departments. You could gain your money out of the efficiency if you could have a better assignment of tasks. It's not necessarily an assault on the labor force. It's more of a fundamental restructuring on how we apply our government. My statewide teacher contract is what I'm advocating, and I think that that's a perfect way of consolidating for cost. Los Angeles is as big as Rhode Island, more people, and still operates a school district, you know, that big. So I don't think it's beyond comprehension. I just think that people are willing, you know, or more provincial in Rhode Island, and as such, they want their local cities and towns to have governance. I advocate a statewide teacher contract, but I'm not asking for the elimination of local school boards to deal with education, which is a real fundamental charge. So I think that there are ways of saving taxpayer dollars and getting a far more effective system.